All right. Hope y'all are doing well. Today we are going to look at a code snippet that works with object-oriented programming via a class, and it also has a nested data structure inside of that class because one of the attributes is a list of strings. So let's get started. As always, just a reminder, memory diagrams are the whole purpose of them is to teach us to read like a computer. So as a computer, we read top down, we also read left to right, and then we also read inside out. Uh, cool. And we also go where we're told. So for instance, this call to the constructor will send us from line 18 to line 6. Great. Let's get started. So, as a computer, we start on line 1 and we see a call, or not a call, we see a class. So, over in Stack, we'll create a little slot to refer to the class team. Over in the heap, just like we would a function, so for the class, we specify it as a class defined from lines 1 to the last indented line underneath the class, so line 15. So it's 1 through 15. Oh, and we'll store that over in the stack. Oh, we have no reason to actually go in to any of these, so instead we skip down to line 17. Line 17 creates a list, which we're all pretty familiar with, but just to reiterate, have these brackets here noting that we're creating this list and we're populating it with two strings, Alyssa and Jaden. Over in the heap, bigger. And give it an ID, the list of strings. Currently we have two values, Alyssa, Jaden. Then we go and tie it back to the stack. So now whenever we see teammates, we're referring to this list of strings. Cool. All right. On with line 17, moving on to line 18. Line 18 says, cool, we're creating a new variable. We're going to call that team0. And what is going to be the value stored there? Well, it's going to be of type team. So we know it's going to be an object, the team class. And then we're calling the constructor with these arguments. Now, constructor is just a function call. We know it's a function call because of these parentheses. And we know it's a constructor because the name of the function is the same as its type. We know that this is creating new team object. This will send us, oddly enough, to the init method. The init method is just the name, the standard name that we give to all constructors of any class. So we're going to go ahead and make an init frame. And name it the name of the class. So the class is team. Give this little hashtag to note that it is a class. or it is a method of a class, and then we give it the init underscore underscore init underscore underscore method name. Just like with any function, we have to create a return address and a return value slot. Return address is going to be line 18. Line 18 there, and then we have build out our parameters. So we come up to the init method definition. We have three parameters: self, input name, and input players. So self, input name, and input players. Self creates the object. We need to look at this blueprint here to know how to create this object. Give it an ID. It's a team object. Just like this was a list of strings object, this is the team object. And then we come over attributes to see how we blueprint this up. So we have a team name and a players attribute. Over here, put in team name and players. Well, we were given, yeah, that's all we do there, except we now have to tie this back to self. So now our object is tied to self within this local init frame. Great. There's two more parameters to build out. Input name links up to the string rockets, and input players links up to teammates. Let's do rockets real quick. That one's pretty easy. Input players. That is being passed in with teammates. So teammates ID 1 is what is passed in because that's the value stored at teammates. That's what's passed in the argument, which will fill out the parameter slot for input players. ID 1 is going to be the value stored at input players. Great. We build out our parameters. Now we're ready to step into our init method. First thing we're doing is we're saying, hey, go to self.team. Well, this is like an address. Self is the street. That takes us to this street. And we're looking for the team name house. Well, that's this house right here. And what are we going to store in that house? We're going to store input name. Well, input name's value is rockets. The value we're storing in this house is rockets. Then we do the exact same thing for self.players. So self takes us here. Dot players takes us to this house right here. And we're putting in that house input players. Well, input players is ID 1. We put ID 1. Well, init method is special because it does not specify a return type, nor does it have a return statement, but it does return something. In particular, it returns the self object. So we put the pointer to the self object in the return value slot and return it to its return address. So over in globals, under team 0, we're going to store D2. Great. Now what? Well, now we're going to head on to line 19. line 19 creates another team. So we'll create that other team up here in globals. We don't have a slot for it yet. That looks terrible. Team 1. And we don't have a value for it yet, but that's where the init method comes in. So again, we're making a call to the team constructor, because we have a function call whose name is the same as the team class. So that's going to send us to the init method. So let's build out our init frame. Team is the name of the class. Hashtag underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Return address, return value. Return address is line 19. And then we have our parameters self, input name, and input letters. Cool. Now, it's a little tricky because we have passed in as an argument a list, which constructs a list. So let's put a pause on that for a second. We're gonna fill in wombats for our input name. Now, in order to pass in this list literal as an argument, we have to first construct that list. So over in the heap, we're going to create a list object. And actually, I'm just going to make it nice and small. Give it an ID. Next available ID is ID 2. And we know it's going to be a list. A list of what? We didn't really specify, did we? This is where we can go up to our argument, or excuse me, our parameters and our method definition, and see that it only accepts list of strings. So whatever this list ends up being here, or up here, or wherever we end up using it, it better be a list of strings. So we can feel safe in saying that over here, we can confidently call this a list of strings. Now there's no value stored in this list, right? So we can just leave it just like that and tie it back in the stack. And then finally, just like we did with the first init, we got to create our new team object. Give it an ID, next available ID of 4. Team object has 2 attributes. Team name and players. We tie that object back into the stack with its ID. Great. So we built out our parameters. Now we're ready to step in. First item, self.teamName. Well, self takes us over here. Team name takes us to this slot. And what are we saying? Well, we're adding to it input name. The input name is wombats. So over here, I'm just going to put wombats. And then we do the exact same thing for self.players. So self takes us here. Players takes us here, in particular this little slot right here, and we're adding to it the value stored at input players, which is ID 3. We have ID3. Just to visualize, now we have two teams on the stack. Both are pointing to two lists on the stack. And so this is pointing to this is pointing to this. Cool. Almost done, but we have to return something because it is the init method. In particular, we are returning self. AD4 gets returned to line 19, where we assign it to team 1 in globals. All right, so we've built our objects. Now we can start playing with them. Line 20 says team1.addPlayer Kiara. Okay, what is this doing? Well, we're calling a method on an object. We're passing into it Kiara. Kind of general terms, what's going on. The object that we're calling this method on is team1. The method name is addPlayer. And the other argument is this string Kiara. So team1, which points to this object right here. So we're passing this object into the addPlayer method. So self will be this object. And then player name will be this second argument. You can always think of the first argument in a method as being self, being the object the method is being called on. And then any other arguments are going to be inside these parentheses. Well, just like with any function, because a method is a function, I'm going to create a frame for it. It's a method, the team class, so we have to put in this class name hashtag symbol to show that. And then the name of the method is add player. Return address, return value slot. Return address is line 20. And then our parameters are going to be self and player name. So self and player name. We're going to run out of space. Cool. Self is going to be the value of the object that add player was called on. So in this case, ID1, which is ID4, or excuse me, team1, which is ID4. And then the player name is the second argument. So player name will be PR. Cool. Alrighty, let's step in. What are we doing here? Well, we're saying self.players.append. Well, what's going on there? Well, append is a functionality. It is a function. It's a method of the list class. So it's a method that is called on a list. Well, self.players. Well, what does that do? Self.players. That takes us to a list. So what are we doing? We're adding on to this list whatever's stored in player name. Well, PR is stored in player name. So all we're doing is adding on to this list PR. And that's it. Nothing's been returned from this add player method. So we are good to immediately come back to line 20. Because there is no return value, throw a none in here. Oh, done with line 20. On to line 21. Line 21 was exactly the same thing. Creates another add player frame. the return address of line 21. Self again is going to be team1. So what's stored in team1? ID 4. So ID 4. And then player name. We'll pass in and store the value Shefali. Right. Cool. Just like we did in the previous frame, all we're doing is going to self.players, which takes us to this list right here, and we're adding to it the value stored in player name. Great. All right. No return value, so we just throw none in there. And we return back to line 21. We're done with line 21. We'll move on to line 22. Line 22 calls print on team 1. Well, without something like the stir magic method, if we called print on team 1, it would print out ID 4. In reality, in your computer, it would print out a long hexadecimal number, but because we have defined the stir magic method, we are able to override that functionality and print out whatever we want. Well, you might also ask, hey, why are we going to stir? We're just calling print. Well, something fun about print is that in order for print to work, it has to take in a string. So anytime print is called, it also calls stir on whatever's inside of it first. That's why this is called stir and not print. Just a little fun side fact. Let's build our stir magic method. Team underscore underscore stir underscore underscore. Got a return address of line 22. Don't have a return value slot yet, but I imagine it might be a bit big. Two parameter, or excuse me, one parameter for stir. It's just self. We're passing in team1 as our argument. So team1's value is ID 4. So self's value is also going to be ID 4. Cool. First line of our stir magic method creates a local variable. This variable's name is info. I'm going to give myself plenty of room. Make a slot for info. Well, what is info? Info is an F string. It has inserted in it a string of a colon, and on either side of it, you have attributes. So in particular, self.teamName is going to take us to this object, and we're going to access this value. So the first part of this is nice and easy. It's going to be wombats colon. Remember, the colon comes right here. Now, self.players. Self.players takes us here, which takes us to this list. So it's asking us to provide us with the string of this list. Well, that, if you remember back, looks like this. First one, second one. When you call print on a list, it prints out the exact literal as if you were going to create it. So this is the value we're storing in info. And where are we returning it? Oops, excuse me, jumping ahead. The next thing we do is we return this value. So our return value is this entire string. So it may seem like a pain, but we actually have to write out the string again. Um, no, that's not good. Colon, Kiara, Shifali. Oh, have the return value. As soon as we have the return value, we return it right back to the return address. So this whole thing right here gets replaced with this string. Then we print that. So we finally have a string that we can send to output. Over in output, we're going to write out our string. And yeah, that's one thing important to note is that our string itself does not have quotes around it in output. That's not what you would see if you called print on this in your computer. However, if you called print on this in your computer, you would see these little quotes around each string inside of this list. Okay, that pretty much sums up this memory diagram. If you're still confused or if you have any questions, please come to office hours or tutoring. We'd be happy to walk you through it. Thanks. Have a good one.